He goes from the seriousness doubter to beginning to see signs that this reality that he keeps saying that this is reality is not, and it's being shattered. There's a fear there that you begin to see creeping into him, even as he's saying, no, this is reality, this is reality. There's a desperation that begins to build until ultimately at that ending, he's giddy.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Skiffy and Fanny shows at the movies.
Do you read Sutter Kane?
I am Sutter Kane.
I was doing that in my Craig voice.
Is that your Craig? Do you read Sutter Kane? I need more whiskey. I'm Sean.
I'm Daniel.
And on today's show, we are discussing the 1994 cosmic horror movie In the Mouth of Madness, written by Michael DeLuca and directed by John Carpenter with cinematography by Gary B. Kibbe. It stars Sam Neill, also Earth's treasure, Sam Neill, as he's known.
Treasure from New Zealand.
Correct, but he is a treasure of the Earth. So, just saying. Sam Neill, we love you. You're free to come on the show at any moment. Also has Julie Carmen, Jürgen Prochnow, and featuring as well David Warner, John Glover, Francis Bay, and Hayden Christensen's in this movie. What?
Yep, his film debut.
Is he the child in the church?
He is the child on the bike.
That's Hayden Christensen?
Supposedly.
Oh, he's so cute, though.
The paper boy. At the end. The little paper boy. Yeah.
Oh, well, one day he went bad.
And he was all concerned about Sam Neill. Like, were you in an accident, sir?
Yeah. Oh, that's so cute.
Can I help you? Yeah, back when he cared.
Oh, he's dead now in that universe, so probably.
Yeah. Just like everyone. Before we get into discussion of the movie, a reminder to our listeners to please share your questions and comments with us at skiffyandfancy.com/listener suggestions. If you aren't already, join us on Twitch for Sean's Alphabet streams every Friday at 7 p.m. Central to be a part of our interactive live streaming show format. Finally, be sure to review and spread the word about our show. Help support us through our Patreon and be part of our Torture Cinema polls, live watches, and other special Patreon-only events on Discord.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Daniel, you have been volunteered for this. Can you give us a brief summary of In the Mouth of Madness?
Sure. So, in the Mouth of Madness, Sam Neill plays John Trent, who is an insurance investigator looking out for insurance fraud. And he is someone that loves his job. He really gets a thrill from sort of the chase and from challenging people that are trying to scam the system. And after showing his skills at this for a little while in the movie, actually, even before we see that, we see Sam Neill, though, being committed to an insane asylum. So the movie actually begins showing Sam Neill becoming committed to the asylum and getting thrown into his cell. And then he is visited by the doctor and he begins telling his backstory of the time when he was working for the insurance company. And this put him on the path of being hired by the publishers of famous horror novelist Sutter Kane, who is bigger than Stephen King. And Sutter Kane has just finishing his latest novel, but has basically dropped off the face of the earth. Nobody has seen him for a long while. And so the publisher is worried about losing money from the novel and wants Sutter Kane found of where he is. And so Sam Neill then tries to find Sutter Kane, and he's unfamiliar with his writing, with his novels. So he buys all the novels and basically puts them into a collage, and from the collage deduces that Sutter Kane is in a certain part of New England that is where his fictional stories are told, kind of like Stephen King's Castle Rock. And Sam Neill is not bothered by sort of the eccentricities that Sutter Kane supposedly has, and by the weird reactions of his fans to his upcoming novel. There are stories going around sort of in the news of fans acting violently at releases at bookstores when they find out Sutter Kane's new novel isn't there. And indeed, prior to him being even hired by the publisher, a crazy axe-wielding man tried to attack and kill John Trent, played by Sam Neill. And only thereafter does John Trent learn from the publisher that that person who tried to kill him with the axe was actually Sutter Kane's agent, who has gone mad from having read Sutter Kane's book, and he was the last person to actually see Sutter Kane. So in any case, now that John Trent has some idea where Sutter Kane may be, he travels to try to find this, what was thought to be fictional town in New England. And with him is Linda Stiles, played by Julie Carmen, who is the editor at the publication house for all of Sutter Kane's work. And together they go and they, through mysterious, weird, dreamlike circumstances, they end up finding the town, and there they find Sutter Kane, played by Jürgen Prochnow, and they discover, particularly John Trent, discovers that the rational world that he is used to thinking about and investigating may not be all that he thought it was.
Fun fact, I don't know if you know, by the way, that the one and only Wilhelm von Homburg is in this movie.
I did not.
He goes by other
names.
Is? Well, so you may know him from Ghostbusters 2 as Vigo from the painting.
Oh, yeah, Vigo.
Yes.
That is him. Yes. Totally makes sense. Yep.
He was
Vigo.
Yes, he goes by another name, Norbert, or I can't remember the last name. I think his stage name was Wilhelm von Homburg because it sounds weirdly Weimar Republic-y. But interestingly enough, he was a professional boxer before he turned to film. I wouldn't say great boxer. Fine. Not great. Challenged for a couple of low-level belts. But he plays Simon in this and unfortunately blows off his own head.
One of the residents, the resident of Hobbs End, right? One of
Correct.
The ones that are basically characters in Kane's brain and novel.
Correct. Yeah. So I thought people would find that interesting because it is interesting. So there you go. So we have to kind of start with the big question, and I'll turn it to you again, Daniel. What'd you think about this movie? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Did it give you nightmares?
I don't know as it gave me nightmares, but I overall enjoyed it very much, more than I expected to. I first heard about this movie back when it first came out, seeing trailers for it on TV. And it came out at a time where I was probably maybe like a couple years too young to really see a movie like this in the theaters. And by the time I began watching horror movies like this, I rented, Carpenter's Halloween. I didn't rent, his latest one because this had been out, not long before that. And it wasn't well received when it came out. It wasn't panned necessarily, but everyone was like, it's not great. It's okay. And, if you want to seek John Carpenter, you watch Halloween. And so I never had gotten to see it. And then fast forward through the years, finally getting to watch it, knowing really nothing about it other than it must involve madness and that the vague sort of memories of the commercials that I saw. I enjoyed it a lot, and it surprised me also because I'm not one really for cosmic horror. So even though they compare him to Stephen King within the movie a lot, and you have this fictionalized New England town, kind of like Castle Rock, but here, Hobbs End, thematically, this is much closer to Lovecraft. And that's not something that I really love or enjoy a ton. I don't dislike it at all either. I'm somewhat ambivalent to it usually. I can enjoy it. But this, after I watched it, I was like, this is the best presentation of cosmic horror I've seen. Because, particularly in a film form. Because we can talk about it more later, but I think cosmic horror is really hard to pull off.
Yes.
particularly once you get to the climax of it. And the idea of madness is hard to pull off. I don't think it's a perfect movie. There are issues in it, definitely, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But overall, it's really fascinating. It does the themes well. And the special effects are really cool. And Sam Neill is great in it.
Yes.
So, yeah. What about you?
I like this movie quite a bit. It is not his best film, certainly. I think it goes without saying that probably his most influential film is either The Thing or Halloween, which I think is inevitable because they both sort of did quite a lot for the genre of sort of straight slasher horror with Halloween, right? Setting up a whole massive wall of horror films, giving us effectively the concept of the final girl. Halloween is like the film they use as the primary example of this, and The Thing being science fiction horror and being quite honestly pretty terrifying actually as science fiction horror. And I think it's not his worst film, which I still submit is Ghosts of Mars, which is just an atrocious
Which
film.
You did for Torture, right?
Yes. I think a lot of people dislike his vampires, and I don't dislike vampires as much. I think it's an interesting film. It's got its own problems. And Vampires is just a few years after this one. And my thinking about In the Mouth of Madness is I pretty much agree with you that I can't think of any film of roughly this era or roughly the sort of 20-year period of this era that does cosmic horror as well as this film does. There must be exceptions, right? I just don't know them all, but
so not
the
in
ones
at least not that I know of in the traditional sense of it. In some ways, something like Event Horizon is cosmic horror, but it's sci-fi cosmic horror.
Right, you're thinking like the true
regard,
supernatural. You're thinking the true supernatural.
And the existential kind of dread, at least what I remember of Event Horizon. So I guess there's other movies that kind of deal with some similar themes that, I mean, that wasn't well loved at the time and I think is more respected now. But in the traditional Lovecraft way, I mean, most real Lovecraft adaptations had been done prior, the bigger ones that got cult status. In the 90s, the ones that were being made that I know of were really cheap, like direct-to-video kind of ones, I think.
And I don't know, I can't think of anything of this era that I would call really particularly good in its treatment of cosmic horror. I found this film in particular, it's the fact that the cosmic horror element does not really get truly revealed until the very end. There's like all these hints, but we don't really see it till the very end. And I think you could make the mistake of overindulging in all of the animatronics and weird puppetry and stuff, and this doesn't. It does some Spielbergian things where it sort of just recognizes that if you show this too much, it loses what makes it terrifying because the technology is just not really quite there yet, or they just didn't have the money for it, potentially. So for me, the cosmic, the element of the story following Sam Neill's Trent losing his sanity and constantly fighting against what to the rest of us is very obviously the actual reality. And he keeps saying, no, that's not reality. And that descent until finally he hits basically rock bottom. I found that to be quite compelling and pretty effective overall.
Right.
And that's helped by Sam Neill's performance. He does a really good job in this film. I mean, it's Sam Neill. I don't know that he's ever phoned in a performance. He gives his all to this performance, and you believe it. You believe that this is a man that, even though he's like an investigator, a fraud investigator, he's like a very matter-of-fact kind of man who has hit a point where the notions of what is real fact has lost its meaning, and how do you make sense of that world anymore? Right. I think the end scene in particular, maybe a little underwhelming of him laughing in the movie theater at a movie of himself. It's a little underwhelming in some aspect, but then if you think about it as oddly the most sane thing you could do in that circumstance, the world has gone to hell in a handbasket at this point.
Right. I mean, I found that ending to be like perfection. But I understand the idea that it's somewhat underwhelming in terms of like a big cinematic climax. or somebody wanting to see the sort of fall of civilization. It's a microcosm of that being shown, but I found that so much more interesting, and that journey that he goes on as a character, and that's so well acted, as you said. He goes from this seriousness doubter to beginning to see signs that this reality that he keeps saying that this is reality is not, and it's being shattered. There's a fear there that you begin to see creeping into him, even as he's saying, no, this is reality, this is reality. There's a desperation that begins to build until ultimately at that ending, he's giddy. It turns completely into this giddiness and which, like you said, that's the most sane response.
Which in and of itself sounds insane.
It's like Oingo Boingo song. It only makes me laugh. Like when you hit rock bottom, that's what happens. And it also is so nice that so Carpenter doesn't show what happens as everything's falling apart, really. You see it has fallen apart, but he doesn't show you that process. And showing utter madness, utter destruction of the world is difficult to pull off in a way that makes it still seem frightening and not seem cartoonish or over the top. By showing the emotions that happen and sort of the intellectual damage that it does is more effective at being scary, I think, than seeing those horrors.
It's a very interesting film, I think, overall. And I don't know, I found the experience, I like John Carpenter just in general, except Ghost of Mars, that movie can die in a fire. Overall, I just really like the feel of John Carpenter movies. There's something about the aesthetic of John Carpenter films, especially when he starts getting budgets that let him kind of really tease it out a little bit. Not big budgets, but with Halloween, the budget's like $300,000, right? That is a shoestring budget for that film, and there's a limit to how much of like the Carpenterisms you can get into there. This film, it's like an 8, 10 million, 14 million budget, somewhere in that territory, depending on how you do the weird math. And you get this real feel, the cinematography, the way shots are constructed in this that feels like a John Carpenter film, very similar to like Big Trouble in Little China with, less of the sort of action and the comedy that's there. Mm-hmm. And I find that just very inviting. I mean, actually, you know what I realized? Prince of Darkness. That would be the film I would better compare this to, which makes sense because they're both part of what he calls the Apocalypse trilogy, with the Thing being the first one. Although I don't really... The Thing is like the one that feels the least connected to the rest of them to me, but whatever.
In the sense of apocalypse, it does. Yeah. Of, civilization. This is an event that is now going to cause the collapse of civilization, or at least the destruction of humanity, for some kind of other presence that's going to come. So I don't know about...
see it.
We don't see it, but we suspect that something like it's going to happen, right?
Yeah, I think the difference
by the end of the thing.
Yeah, I think the difference is like Prince of Darkness and this, it's just more blatantly obvious what the consequences. And in this film, I think because it's the last in the trilogy, it literally shows us the consequence. Or I should say literally shows us. It heavily tells us what the consequence is. We don't really see the full extent of it. We mostly get it told to us or implied to us. But that consequence has occurred, which in this case, an actual apocalypse takes place, in which people who were exposed to Sutter Kane's final work have basically been driven to violent madness and are running amok, killing and destroying everything. I love the moment when, is it in the padded room after he's drawn all the crosses on with the black crayon, and Trent, Sam Neill's character, is like talking to some guy, and the guy is like, well...
To David Warner,
yeah. And he's talking to this guy, and the guy's like, well, but like, not everybody reads, right? And Sam Neill like looks at him and says, but there's also a movie. Like, the knowing smile that he gives is really, really, really great. Yeah, anyway, like the point I'm kind of making is that I think this film feels a lot of similarities in style to Prince of Darkness. And I like both of those films because of the style quite a lot. This is a film I could watch again. I would really enjoy watching it again.
Yes,
I don't necessarily
definitely
find it scary per se, but it is a lot of fun to watch.
I've actually never seen Prince of Darkness, so I'll have to correct that.
Must fix your life.
Yeah.
It's worth it. It's really good.
I have seen The Fog, and that too I would say has a vibe or similarities to this as well. I completely forgot he did Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which which also had Sam Neill in it. Oh my goodness, I didn't remember that. I saw that in the theater when it came out, and I have not seen it since. But that's a very different kind of movie from John Carpenter, if I remember correctly.
He's done a bunch of very different types of films, and yet there is a distinct, and I don't know how to quite, it's sort of like Tarantino has, like when Tarantino does a movie, you know it's a Tarantino
There's
movie.
There's a look to it, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
John Carpenter's the same. That you can kind of feel a John Carpenter movie. I don't know exactly what it is. This is where we need David. David would like tell us like, oh, it's the shot compositions with the, like he uses the microtonal soundscape or something. Like he would just tell us some like, and then yell some French at us, right? What was I getting? So I lost my
There's
train of
a
thought.
simplicity to all of his. I think a lot of his stuff is fairly straightforward. He doesn't beat around the bush.
He doesn't.
In his stylistic in his aspects, and his stories tend to be, I mean, I hesitate to call this straightforward, but they are somewhat straightforward in their overall concept.
Or at least comprehensible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't necessarily get all the answers.
The other thing is the music is always,
which is John Carpenter.
He's very good at incorporating the music in, and this, like in Halloween, when he couldn't get the music he like originally wanted, he just,
made the theme,
composed
that
his
all of us
own,
know.
right? He just makes his own. That's great. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because in chat they're kind of mentioning Drunken Garbage. Dan is mentioning that he has great scores, and John Carpenter has done many of his own scores, but John Carpenter is also a composer. And I found that interesting in listening, kind of paying attention to the score, because I just recently watched Halloween because my students for their horror week watched the original Halloween because I don't know, I just really love that film. The score in Halloween is really sparse. It is very minimalistic, very sparse. It does not have a lot of grand flourishes. It sort of uses the Halloween theme almost like as a tension builder, because a lot of the scenes are like Michael Myers stalking people and very slowly.
And there are notes that just come in briefly. The notes themselves are almost like stabs, right? Yeah.
Whereas this is a little bit more of a fluid composition. It has, I feel like, a little bit more of a grandiose score without abandoning that John Carpenter synthetic quality, because so much of his scores are they're synth heavy oriented. He's really interested in the electronic, and that a lot of that is still also present here. It's a very good score, and I think it is simultaneously beneficial to the film in terms of building some of the tensions, etc., but also doesn't draw attention to itself as much.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I don't know if I could say anything intelligent on the score per se of In the Mountain of Madness, other than that I have the sense that it really enhanced the viewing experience without standing out. And like you said, I kind of want to go back and listen to it again with a bit more of a practiced ear, or being familiar with it now to see what he does with that, because in Halloween, the main theme has that 5/4 time signature that just completely throws you off and makes you at unease. I could see him employing those same things of incorporating unease and the sense of encroaching madness in ways that are far less obvious, because this is a more insidious threat of the cosmic horror as opposed to an in-your-face slasher. So the music has to be more insidious than what the previous film, Halloween, would have needed. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. It requires a very different kind of soundtrack, and I think it's probably helped that the budget is larger here, so he probably has more time to work on that than he probably did with Halloween. Although not the budget that I guess he expected to get for this, because his budget was cut, which, whatever, jerks. Yeah. But you're right that it does build, it is positioned very differently, structured very differently than something like Halloween, or even Big Trouble in Little China, which has I think some very different types of sounds that come from his musical score, because that's a film that is like an action film, right?
Mm-hmm.
It requires a different score in a way, or even like Escape from LA, which is like even more an action film.
Is more action.
Yeah, or Escape from New York, should say, but also Escape from LA. Yeah. It's interesting because,
Right.
I mentioned Tarantino, and Tarantino is like sort of like Martin Scorsese and some of those others before Tarantino, where they like talk about him as like the auteur. And what's weird is like in talking about John Carpenter, I think it goes without saying that he is in fact an auteur, right?
Right.
He's so involved in so much of the production process here in a way that, makes this film very distinct. Whereas like we could go back in time and like look at films made during the Hollywood studio era where there's sort of like a rigid standard of what a Hollywood studio film should be structured like. And we could name lots of really great films, but maybe in some cases not really know what makes the director of that film other than knowing the name. Whereas this, like, you could probably, if you know John Carpenter's filmography, if you watch this film not knowing it was his film, you'd probably catch on.
I would be curious to hear David's thoughts on that, because Carpenter totally is an auteur in that, cinematic sense. But compared to all the other auteurs like Tarantino, like Kubrick, like Hitchcock, whoever you want to say, they're even Ty West, all of them have eccentricities. All of them have flamboyance to them, like Wes Anderson, right? The color palettes. The Kubrick definitely had flamboyancy to him.
Yeah.
Carpenter doesn't have that. He has a much more subtle touch while still in an almost like quotidian kind of like day-to-day, like normal person, average touch to the movies that don't come across as pretentious, don't come across as abnormal or different. Does that make sense? And as a result, you don't notice it as directly, yet at the same time somehow manages to have the distinctiveness to it.
Yes, because you're right that, like, if we take Tarantino as our example, like, you would think of, like, Tarantino-style dialogue would be one of your key giveaways, right?
Yes,
so, like, Reservoir Dogs opens literally with all the characters talking around a table about, like, the value of tipping and why you should or should not tip and how much, right? It's a conversation that, in the grand scheme of the film's plot, does not seem relevant. Tarantino says in his interviews that he uses these scenes as, like, basically character development. You learn a lot about who these characters are, what their values are, etc., from these sequences, and so it can make you feel more connected to the characters. But Carpenter doesn't do that. There's no moment where like Sam Neill sits down with any character and like waxes lyrical about unrelated stuff to the film. Every single sequence is in some way related to the plot of the film. So the very first scene we get with him after in the past, right? Not in the very beginning of the film where he's in the padded room, right? And he's committed, right? The very first scene is him literally catching a guy committing fraud with his wife and like unveiling the mystery like the grand investigator, almost noir fashion, right? And we would think that would be unrelated, except that is the whole impetus for the entire plot. He is only involved in this because of his superior ability to catch fraud. And so he is literally hired to go after Sutter Kane to figure out whether or not this claim that is made by the publisher is a legitimate claim. And that's what leads him down this path, right? Not by any fault of his own. It should be noted, it is not his hubris that leads to his downfall. It turns out, no, sometimes things happen to you and there's nothing you can do about it. So I think it's really an interesting way of telling this story, because when we say it's matter of fact, we say that he doesn't beat around the bush about what characters are up to, what they feel, what the plot is, etc. It means that to some degree, we're actually watching this because we have the beginning right where he's being committed. We're watching this also looking for all the clues. We're watching it kind of like Sam Neill's character is watching all of the people he's trying to catch in a crime, right? Which is fun. I don't know. I think that's fun.
And slowly see everything come apart too, which to some degree, I don't know about all of his movies, but ones that I can think about off the top of my head that I have seen, like The Thing, The Fog, Halloween, this. Yeah. At least all the horror ones, they all share that quality of having a certain nihilistic bent to them, of of there being something out there that is an evil that's not quite definable, that is a threat that it's kind of hopeless to fight against. And you have sort of scientific figures of some kind that no longer really act scientific because they realize that it's not rational. You can't fight this with rationalism. And so you have like Donald Pleasance in Halloween yelling at everybody about Michael Myers, about how he's evil and how like you need to do this or that, like completely not acting as an actual medical care doctor would do, a psychological doctor would do. Because to him, like this is pure evil. This is irrational. And so in some ways, Sam Neill is becoming Donald Pleasance's type of character in Halloween.
I like that you raised that concern because in a lot of Carpenter's horror, when I think about it, there is a huge element of the main characters cannot do anything to stop what is going to happen. It is a thing that will happen to them no matter what they do, right? And like Halloween is kind of a unique example because Michael Myers is, at least in the original timeline, simultaneously just a man who is pure evil and also weirdly supernatural, right? But other films...
He's the shape.
Yeah, he's the shape, yeah, right? Other films will deal with, like, Prince of Darkness, where they're literally doing scientific experiments and inadvertently cause all kinds of mayhem involving scary things and possessions and so on. These are things that scientific instruments can't do anything about, right? The rationality of the police force in Halloween, they can't do anything about Michael Myers. Guns don't work. You can't cut him. You can't do any of these things. Acting like he's a normal killer is fundamentally irrational. Weirdly enough, Donald Pleasance's character, who is Sam Neill, you're right, very similar, is the most rational character. But I think the big tragedy in both of these films is in Halloween, we sort of learn it very quickly that he's actually right and nobody listens to him. And that's the sort of tragedy. In this film, we don't know yet that Sam Neill isn't actually insane, right? Because he's not. He has cracked under the pressure to a degree, but he's not insane. He has experienced something beyond reason and rationality and has understandably taken the only rational course out, which is to get himself locked up in a padded room because everyone else is just snapping and killing everybody left and right. It's the only rational choice.
Right. And not able to come up with an explanation for it all.
Correct.
And just ignoring it. Yeah.
Carpenter's thriller films and action films are not like this.
Nothing. No. That's correct.
Yeah. Which I think is
but
super
even The Fog, you're fighting something without form there, right? So a similar thing. It's an inescapable threat to you. And that's why the cosmic horror does so well here, I think, because that's a key defining feature of cosmic horror. It's this threat that you're not going to win against, that there is no fighting against. It's inevitable. So that's part of why I think it works so well.
Yeah, I love that they describe what happens in the world as an infection, right? An epidemic, a pandemic, right? That something has happened where people who've been exposed to Sutter Kane's work in this film, like, are infected by madness. That is really terrifying, right? And it must be speaking in some way to sort of like the history of mental illness, where people could think that they might be inheritable or that you could give them to other people. I don't think they tease it out very much here, but it is an interesting thing to think about, because typically when we think about like infectious diseases in the 1990s, we're thinking AIDS, which is like a rational disease caused by people's behaviors, right? Whereas this, like, nobody in their right mind would ever think that if you just read a novel, it turns you into, a raging, rabid lunatic who just murders people. And so there's like two things I think going on here. One is like a commentary being made about the real fear and terror of like a pandemic, which is like the complete inability to trust anybody around you because any one of them can infect you and then you become like them. And then another commentary is being made here, I think very loosely, about the power of the written language and its ability to basically mind screw people and get them to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do, which is layered throughout this, right? Because once we learn about the Sutter Kane novelist, we already are getting these news stories, these little moments where they're saying, oh, like, people read the books and then they go nuts, or people really want the books, but the bookstore can't get enough copies and then they lose their mind. And like attack the bookstore and it's violence, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
All of that is very linked to sort of the tradition of cursed objects in horror, and the idea, right, that like, and I love stories like that link to like, you see a movie and you go crazy, you see a movie and it's evil and it causes something, read a book and it does it. So it continues that, but you're right that here it takes that very old tradition in horror literature, I would say, and that continued in horror movies, and puts a modern kind of spin to it, or combines it with, horror movies in the past like Nosferatu that have been commentaries on epidemics. Uses that to also talk about disease spread and the fears that are associated with that. And also uses the whole plot as a way to kind of explore a feeling that to me was the scariest part of that movie, is like, I could see living in this world, because I look at reality now and I say, why is reality so crazy? Why are there a bunch of like nut jobs out there doing all these crazy things? And other people are like, oh yeah, that's it. This is just normal, right? And to me, it's like, no, the reality's not supposed to be like this. So I could totally empathize with sort of that panic and the sort of like combative, like, no, reality should be this feelings of Trent, of Sam Neill's character in this.
I like how you say that, because weirdly enough, I find the end of this film oddly way more comforting than the reality we're living in now.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I don't know why. It feels more rational, even though it's like the old ones coming through quite literally.
Bring on our tentacled, slimy overlords.
Yeah, like the cover of a book ripped open in space-time. Like literally that's what we see, right? This hole woven into space-time when Jürgen Prochnow Sutter Kane literally opens himself like a book, and then there's a hole into the gaping chasm of nothingness.
And you see the words on the bent pages.
Right,
yeah, awesome scene. Yeah.
And like, I'm supposed to feel like, oh, this is bananas. Oh my gosh. And then I'm living in this reality and I'm like, no, this is weirdly, I like this. Let's go with this option.
Let's go.
Like, I want to sit in a movie and watch a movie about myself going mad. Let's do it. Like, that's weirdly more fun. I feel like Buster Keaton and Sherlock Jr. Let's go.
Yes. So you mentioned Jürgen Prochnow. I really enjoy his performance in this too. I think it's
the 2 seconds he's in the movie.
Just, yeah, I mean, he's not in it super long, no, but like the scene in the confessional with Sam Neill, I think it's great.
He gives a good performance with the very little that he's given to say.
That he's given.
Right, because he doesn't have a lot. I think the most like defining shot for me is the shot of all the townspeople going up to this church. And the doors like opening, closing, with the kid. And then it opens and it's him with all the lights and his wind in his beautiful hair, just staring out, looking weirdly suave. Yes. And that man has never played like attractive, hot writer before in anything else I've seen him in. And yet I was kind of like enticed. I was like, oh, Jürgen Prochnow, like, all right, man, like you kind of got it going on right now. Except, of course, like he's got weird demonic stuff going on inside that church.
But he's got a great typewriter set up.
Oh, in the creepy room.
Yeah,
with his Dobermans.
Right.
Why Dobermans?
That's a lot of Dobermans.
Yeah. What's with the Dobermans? Do they?
Yeah, I don't know what was up with the Dobermans.
Is it just that they're German?
I have no clue.
Okay, well, maybe it's just the dogs they could get.
I mean, I don't know the connection of like all of that being in the book, what he's writing, those townspeople all coming with guns to like hurt him, the children. A lot of those sort of things are visually offsetting somewhat, but why they're in there in terms of a logical sense is hard to discern, but it's also hard to discern logic amid madness. Which is what's hard to pull off with a movie like this. It's hard to depict madness in a logical, coherent way that makes sense to an audience, right? That tells a story, which gets back to my idea as why oftentimes I'm disappointed with cosmic horror, because you can't show it. It's so frightening. It can't be seen. It can't be described. And so if you try to, it's disappointing. You can't describe madness in a way that allows you to describe it. It's almost like self-defeating in a way. And And this does the best at straddling that. There's elements that don't make total sense, but they still manage to work without it making so little sense that you just throw up your hands and don't want to watch anything.
Well, this gets to sort of the writing as dangerous kind of element, because the town that they end up in, Hobbs End, right, it's not real. It's from Sutter Kane's novels, but it becomes real through the writing of it. And so simultaneously, Sutter Kane is imagining horror occurring in a place that does not exist and conjuring that place into existence, and therefore torturing and maiming and doing horrible, terrible things to its citizens.
Yeah. Inhabiting it himself, yeah.
And inhabiting it himself, and effectively using it or being used as a gateway to opening to these cosmic monstrosities from elsewhere. And, you know, the townsfolk and their children and so on, yeah, it's not really explained in this. I think the only thing that we know for certain is that whatever Sutter Kane is doing inside this condemned super mega church that he's inside of, he is destroying them, right? They are being consumed by whatever power or forces are at work here. So much so that it appears that he starts with their children, which is like really effed up when you think about it.
They're the first to be taken by the slimy tentacled ones, yeah.
Precisely. And we learn later, inhabit their bodies. Mm-hmm. And then they like rot away from the outside in, which is really sad, because you could feel for the townsfolk when they're there. You know, these are people that like have been conjured into existence. Like, this place doesn't really exist. Yeah. And they're one...
And they know, but they have self-realization of it, right?
Yes, right. They know that they're not there.
Which gets to the human condition, right? The idea that if we are created and we have knowledge of our own mortality and the knowledge of our own doom and pain, and what kind of the nature of that universe, right? This movie gets into those kinds of questions too. And I have a reason for going in this direction that hopefully I'll be able to make clear after I confuse you maybe. But it reminded me a lot of Star Trek, particularly Star Trek The Next Generation, with the holodeck, which Star Trek never really dealt with as fully as it should have. And the concept that you create this world, you create these characters in there to do with whatever the hell you want. You write their lives, you have control over them, they don't have agency. And in certain episodes, you find out that holodeck characters actually have self-awareness and understanding that they are holodeck characters. And then they're sitting there like, wait, you're going to turn off the program and I'm going to wink out of existence. I'm going to do what the story programs me to do. Like, I'm a bum in life because that's what I've been programmed to be. This gets to that same concept. Star Trek ended up, particularly in the early seasons of Next Gen, like the second season, played it almost for like comedic effects and never really get to like how disturbing this is. Even with the Moriarty episodes, didn't get to it. This deals with it in a much more honest manner.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Gosh, Star Trek's morality we could talk about for a whole day. There are some decisions that are made. My students just watched the Tuvix episode of Voyager, so...
Well, this is why I bring this up, because the writer of this movie is the writer of an episode of Star Trek Voyager. The infamous one of the worst episodes of Star Trek ever, where Tom Paris breaks the warp barrier and he and Janeway turn into salamanders and have little baby salamanders together. And I can totally see that the writer of In the Mouth of Madness also wrote at least the original concept. I don't know he wrote it with Brannon Braga, so like there were other, words in there. But the general idea of that episode came from the same mind that wrote In the Mouth of Madness, and that totally makes sense to me.
Oh boy, Star Trek Voyager. I love you and hate you at the same time.
But yeah, Tuvix, like you said, that's the one that's a very disturbing episode, and the morality of it.
Yeah. Yep. I have very strong opinions. Lieutenant Chad says, of Star Trek Voyager, just like the Bible franchise. Yes, equally as potentially screwed up. Yeah. We're getting close to time here. I think we've come pretty close to capturing kind of what our thoughts of this film. I mean, honestly, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I agree completely. The only thing we didn't really mention that doesn't really work for me in the movie is sorry, I'm blanking on her name. Julie Carmen, playing Linda Stiles. She's a good actress. She does her part well. It's just the script doesn't really know, because she's kind of a love interest, but not a love interest. She kind of disappears by the end of the movie. I don't think the movie handles her as well as it could or should.
I would agree mostly. Paul mentioned in chat that there is a minor alternative ending to this film in which her character, Linda Stiles, appears in the movie theater eating popcorn too.
Ah, okay.
Which I think actually should probably be kept here. Yeah, I agree. I think her character's underutilized for sure, and I think the thing it tries to do is to do the thing where she says, as the hole has been opened up, and she's like reading the last novel that is like literally narrating what John Trent's character's doing in this moment. When he says we need to leave, and she basically says no, like it has already been written basically, and I'm not going to leave. You would think that's
I've already read all the way to the end.
Yeah,
exactly.
Already read to the end. That's supposed to be the end of her character, but then it sort of raises a kind of question of like, what was the real purpose of her character in this story? Because her connection to anyone else is anyone who is a main character, which would be just Sam Neill. That connection is minimal, right? And so he cares about her in the sense that he cares about people, but that connection's not terribly deep, so that we don't feel a lot when she's gone.
No, and he like kind of comes onto her at first, but then when she comes onto him, he's off put because it's very obvious that it's not her, and she's not acting, of her own agency or her own how she normally would, right? And so like there's just an odd dynamic with them throughout the movie, and I'm glad they didn't go with like just a love interest kind of storyline, because that would be terrible in this. But at the same time, they don't really have anything for her in this that becomes really instrumental, at least that I can gather from the first viewing.
I think her character is just positioned as the only character connected to Sutter Kane, right? That is going to stay in the story. Because like Sam Neill is the character that is like, okay, I'm here to basically catch you all in a lie and get you on insurance fraud. Her job is, it turns out, well, no, we're trying to find out what happened to Sutter Kane because he disappeared on us. We did it as a stunt, but he actually did disappear. And so that's where their characters are positioned. But because Sam Neill's the main character, pretty much every other character is very secondary by default. And I think this film would have to be another 15 minutes long in order to do her character the kind of justice. And I don't know that the plot of this film can survive that. If that makes sense. Yeah. I like her character. Yeah. I think the things that are most interesting with her character are when we get to see her experience the weird time manipulations, hallucinations, things that like the beginning moments in the car where she's driving and John Trent is asleep, and she's witnessing the kid riding the bike and aging and then going backwards.
As old,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Those sequences, I think, are really interesting because there's a lot of that in this, of her or Sam Neill's character experiencing stuff that seems real but can't possibly be real, and which defies reason. And of course, she believes it much sooner than he does.
Those scenes actually are almost Lynchian in some regards, of like just the highway and the darkness around and these weird characters driving by. Yeah, those are
very much. Yeah, you're right. I don't know. It's fun. I enjoyed this movie. I don't know what to tell you.
If you haven't seen it, definitely recommend checking this one out.
I agree. Well, I think it's time. So we're going to begin our closeout process. So folks, thank you for being here. If you're here with us live. If you're not and you're listening to this later and you'd like to let us know what you thought about the show or the movie or what have you, email us at skiffyandfanty@gmail.com. Or if you were in our Patreon, you can go to our Discord and we have a show discussion channel. You're free to discuss there. We are on Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon, YouTube, a whole bunch of other places. skiffyandfanty.com/skiffythings. And then remember, every Friday at 7 p.m. Central, you can watch us live at twitch.tv/alphabetstreams. And you can see us make episodes live. We have only got a handful more left in the season. Only a few more. If you like the show, spread the word. Tell your friends. Burn CDs of our shows at unsuspecting passengers. Whatever. Right? Podcast apps are great too. And then obviously patreon.com/skiffyandfanty if you've got money that you don't need and you'd like to give it to us because this show costs money. So speaking of Patreon supporters, we got a bunch of people to say thank you to. Andrew the Alluring, Cameron the Chthonic, Carolyn the Benevolent, Carrie the Divine, Chris the Candescent, Dan the Transient, Daniel the Cultured, David the Debonair, JC the Jocular, Jeff the Gracious, Joseph the Jovial, Juan the Junctional, KB the Kind, Karen the Kickass, Kat the Kinematic, and Matthew the Magnificent.
Paul the Pious, Phoebe the Eloquent, Robin the Bold, Ryan the Resilient, Sarah A. the Sensational, Sarah E. the Sublime, Sarah O. the Rapturous, Scott the Gentleman, Stephen the Strange, Tari the Thorough, Tanya the Triumphant, Trish the Imperturbable, and Victor the Valiant.
Yay! So I'm at SeanDuke.net. You can just put /Duke things if you want to find all my socials. And then I am also Alphabet Streams on the Twitch, Wednesdays and Sundays, currently 6 p.m. Central for games and things.
You can find me, Daniel, at Reading 1000 Lives, and with that on Blue Sky and on the Skiffy and Fanty blog.
Excellent. Well, as required by the Skiffy and Fanty bylaws, I must make this happy now. And so, Daniel, you may not know this, but by being on this episode, you have opened a hole into the other dimension. Yes, peel back the layers of your book face,
I'm trying to peel
Paul.
back my face.
You gotta do it harder, my friend. Daniel, come on. And so, yeah, out of that will come a long string of Teletubbies.
One happy thing is we have lots of cool stuff on the slate already for 2026 for Skiffy and Fanty.
That is very cool, and we are not going to say what those are because
no, we aren't.
All right, on that note, awkward ending. Oh, no, happy ending and scene. If you want to support this show, you can go to patreon.com/skiffyandfanty or skiffyandfanty.com, our website, where you can get access to all of our fancy things. Our music comes from Holy Mole. You can support him and his work at patreon.com/holymole. Thank you for listening.